keep finding ways that we're helping partners, finding either, balance in their life or focus or purpose.
Practices that are going to help improve your project management skills or your finances.
We're here to talk about setting long-term goals and then how to achieve them.
Increasing your quality, therefore becoming the best place in town to work.
Welcome everyone to Academy Live. Our guest today is Lisa Plaggemier. Lisa Plaggemier is the Executive Director at the National Cybersecurity Alliance. She is on a mission to empower people and organizations to stay safe online. That way everyone can experience the benefits of technology without all of the worry. She is going to walk us through a presentation she has done a few times called A Whole Lot of BS, Behavioral Science, about cybersecurity. For the first time on the show today, we have a live poll. Very excited about that. Lisa will tell us more about it, but please play along with us. You'll see it in the chat. We're looking forward to having Lisa join us in just a minute. But first, Academy Live wants to hear from you. If you have an idea for a show, you've got a topic, you know a great guest who would love to have on the show, please send us an email. We have the email on the screen, academylive@pax8.com. Reach out to us and let us know about your idea. We would love to have you. If you're a vendor, if you're a partner, if you're a Pax8er, let us know your idea so that we can get you on the show in the new year. Now, without further ado, let's bring on Lisa. Hi, Lisa.
Hey, Lisa.
Welcome to Academy Live. Lisa, do you mind doing a quick introduction?
Thanks for being here.
Yeah, hi, I'm Lisa Plaggemier. I'm the Executive Director of a thing called the National Cybersecurity Alliance. We are actually the founders of Cybersecurity Awareness Month. That's how most people think of us.
Excellent. Can you tell us a little bit about the organization and a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, so at staysafeonline.org, we have all kinds of information to help end users, to help people like my mom and my kids figure out how to use technology safely without that worry that you talked about, without fear of being defrauded or getting scammed or running into something malicious online. And we do it all in layman's terms so that anybody can understand it. So we do training and education type programs all year round on all different kinds of topics.
I think it's great, and to be known, to initiate something like the Cybersecurity Awareness Month, that's huge. I mean, I'm impressed, and what a great thing to be known for. I kind of want to know, a little bit of origin story. Yeah. So what's the origin story? What kind of became it? Like, what was the impetus? What drove this?
Yeah, so it was 21 years ago. So we had our big 20th anniversary party last year. It came out of the wake actually of dealing with 9/11 and what was a fairly brand new agency called DHS, and some large corporations and some folks from DHS got together and said, you know what, maybe we need a nonprofit in the mix that can help educate consumers about the safe use of technology, because we see some things that happened in 9/11 that used technology in ways that weren't good. And maybe a nonprofit, that public-private partnership between those corporations and the government, maybe that partnership is the best way to go about educating the public. Because, the government, even CISA today, is we have a cooperative agreement with the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, part of DHS. We work with them really closely every Cybersecurity Awareness Month and actually all year long. And they do a lot of great messaging, but not everybody wants to listen to the federal government all the time. And not everybody even wants to listen to some of the big companies that support us or that founded the organization. So it's really nice to have a nonprofit that can talk to people in like I said, layman's terms, everyday terms, that if my mom and my kids wouldn't understand it, then we're probably doing it wrong. That's my litmus test. But it's nice to have, kind of this third party. We can do things that are maybe a little bit more interesting or maybe even a little bit edgier than the government might do, or that you might hear from big tech or large corporations.
Awesome. Do you mind sharing a little bit about your background as well? Like, how did you get into this role and how did you get here?
Yeah, so my background actually is a very strange mix of marketing and cybersecurity. I started my career with Ford Motor Company, marketing cars and trucks, doing TV ads and motor shows and everything that you need to do to make consumers aware of your brand and be in the consideration set when they're going to make a purchase decision for a vehicle. And then at some point, I moved into automotive technology, and I went to a company that had 500 million consumer records. And we started doing thought leadership on security topics when the Jeep hack happened, and that made the 6 o'clock news and had everybody in the auto industry nervous that it was going to be their brand getting hacked on live TV next. So that's when I got sucked into the world of cyber, and I found this stuff incredibly, incredibly interesting. And I think what still gets me going every day, what I wake up to every day, and why I'm so happy to work where I work, is because there's still a huge communication gap between those of us fighting the fight all day, that understand what's happening in cyberspace, that understand at this point really the not just the threat to individuals, but also to our democracy, and everybody else who's not paying attention, who might hear about a data breach on the 6 o'clock news and react with some fear or something, but not really know what to do about it. And so that communication gap, like that's where we live, to try and get people more interested in this topic and to try and get them to actually change some of their behavior.
I think it's one of the things, to me, it's very compelling about, what you do and your organization does is making it accessible. I think there's a lot of fear of the unknown behind it, and a lot of that's from the technobabble and the technology, and a lot of people don't. So I really like that approach and that mindset. If the common, person out there, non-technician, can understand it, maybe we're doing something wrong, and really catering to that, I think creates a much bigger impact. So yeah, appreciate
it. I know too. I was going to say before we dive in, we know that from talking to a lot of MSPs, I know, Chris, you used to be an MSP, you work with our MSPs, and so do I in our peer groups every day. This can be a struggle when you're fighting the fight and you're so aware of all the threats and the risks that are out there, how to tell a small, medium-sized business that these risks apply to them too, and getting all those end users to be aware. I think this presentation is going to really help give some language to that and help bridge that gap. So I'm very excited.
We have some advice. We have some words of advice today. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. Chris, anything else to say before we dive in?
No, let's get into the presentation. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing this.
Okay, so there's some audience polling today, so you've got to be ready to, I think, type your answers in the chat is the way it's going to work. But let's just dive in. So as she said, we're going to talk about some BS today, some behavioral science when it comes to cybersecurity. This is what's known as COM-B, the behavioral science model. What this says is that you need capability, which is just knowledge. We give people that when we assign them security training, motivation, and opportunity before you do something, before you exhibit a behavior. So as I said, capability is pretty straightforward. That's knowledge. Opportunity is pretty straightforward as well. If we're not sitting in front of a computer all day, we're probably carrying that supercomputer around in our pockets. So we have plenty of opportunity to interact with technology. Motivation is the really hard part here. We are squishy, unpredictable, emotional human beings. And if we don't feel like doing something, it does not get done. Think about what your kids say when you ask them to clean their room. Mom, I don't feel like it. If we don't feel like going to the gym, if we're not motivated, stuff doesn't happen. It doesn't matter how much capability and opportunity we have. If we're not motivated, then it doesn't get done. So every year we do a report that we call O-Behave. And we ask people this year, we added AI there at the bottom because we all have to talk about AI this year. But we ask about these 5 core behaviors, their password habits, using MFA, installing updates, checking for phishing, and really all types of social engineering, backing up your data. And then this year, for the first time, we asked about people's use of AI. This year, we surveyed people in 7 countries. So it was all the 5 Eyes countries plus Germany and India. And it's 1,000 people from age 18 all the way through retirees. So some people are in the workforce, but not everybody. But we tried to capture the demographics match the demographics in the census of every country. We also asked them about their emotions, though. How do they feel about security and some of these behaviors? And the reason is, sorry about that. The reason is that One of my favorite advertising gurus when I was at Ford is Seth Godin, and he says facts don't change people's behavior, emotion changes people's behavior. So that's exactly what we're talking about there. Is this whether he knew it or not at the time? Seth was actually referring to the behavioral science model, right? That the way to influence people is through their emotions, because that's where they find their motivation. So that's why we also ask people about their feelings. And we're going to start by asking your audience today a question about their feelings. I bet you didn't think you'd come to a presentation about cybersecurity and somebody was going to ask you how you feel about it. But this is to get at your motivation. So first poll question for you today. How do you feel about this statement? And the more of you participate, the more fun this will be. And then we're going to see how you compare to the general public. How do you feel about this statement? I prioritize staying secure online. Do you strongly disagree with this, somewhat disagree, neither agree nor disagree, or neutral about it, or somewhat agree or strongly agree? And we'll see how you guys score on this one. We'll give you a minute to take the poll.
It just, while we're doing this, Lisa, I kind of want to just chime in and ask, that's really powerful to me, like that last thing about the motivation. And I think that a lot of our partners, a lot of MSPs, a lot of people in tech don't put enough thought in it. Like I hadn't even thought about it, right? Like I think that it's great that you kind of bring that up and mention it, but how powerful that is. We spend, I think, so much time thinking about the data and the facts. And don't you know that 43% of this and 72% of statistics are made up on the spot, or whatever it is, trying to convince them rather than tying to a feeling. I don't think we think about that or know how. So I'm looking forward to maybe putting it out there to you to help us think through how do we take the facts, while useful and needed, but to tie them into a motivation or the emotional response. So thank you.
Yeah, we spend a lot of time. If you look at the average organization that is going to do some security training, they're going to spend a lot of time looking at their policies and deciding what they're going to train people on. And they're going to get into the nuts and bolts of what's the content of the training. And it might have to go through different departments to be reviewed, all focused on the content. I wish we spent that much time focused on how are we going to get people engaged? What's going to make this interesting to them? How are we going to motivate them to actually do some of these things? So we'll talk about that as we go. So let's see, what does the survey say right now? It looks like there's a whole lot of agreement here. I would expect that from this audience. I'd be really disheartened if I saw people disagreeing with this. Let's see how that compares to the general public, though. So they don't agree quite as much as you guys. In fact, 14% of people feel neutral about this. When we break this down, this is where it gets really interesting. When we break this down by age group, you can see this to me is fascinating, because you've got the blue line is the people that agree. As we get older, we tend to agree that this is more of a priority. So why is that? So our hypothesis is that as we accumulate more assets in life, we have more to protect. So we might say that this is more important because our bank accounts look a little different when we're older than they did when we were college students. But look at Gen Zs there in the pink. 12% of them disagree with this. So that I thought was really interesting. Like, I don't think about this stuff. This is not a priority for me. I just go online to do whatever it is I need to do. So at least they're being honest.
Yeah.
All right.
I wonder if that has to do with growing up with the internet versus. So I'm part of that millennial age group, but we're taught all the time, don't trust things on the internet. Like Wikipedia could be written by anyone. So we have a little more of that than maybe the younger generation. I'm curious.
Maybe, yeah. There's a few more questions that we'll get into that a little bit deeper. Cool. That's pretty interesting. Okay, let's look at the next poll question. Staying secure online is under my control. How do you feel about this one? This is the next poll question. Do you disagree or agree? Somewhere in the middle. Does what you do matter? Do you feel a sense of personal agency? As you can imagine, you might think, well, what's the control? What does that have to do with motivation? Well, if you think about it, if I don't think that what I do matters, if I don't think I can be effective, and all this bad stuff keeps happening in cyberspace, there's nothing I can do about it to protect myself. That's pretty demotivating. That's just not just a lack of a motivator, but I would argue that feeling no sense of personal agency, not thinking you can be effective, actually demotivates you. So we
Yeah.
think personal agency has a really big effect on your motivation. So let's see what people are saying here.
Yeah, this is where I want to jump ahead. This is when I saw this come up, I wanted to like go ahead to the answer section. I was like really excited to see. I'm really curious what the age breakdown is on some of these answers.
Yeah, so let's see what this says. Let's compare these results. I would expect most of you to agree that that what you do matters. The public is not so sure. 55% of people agree with this to some extent, but then you've got almost a third of people that aren't sure. And we see that in our education programs all the time, that people see a data breach in the headlines and they don't understand that they feel that that's completely out of control, and they don't understand that there's things that they can do to protect themselves that are even more important that they do as a result of a breach, actually. Okay, so now we're going to dive into that list of behaviors that we talked about at the beginning. And the first one we've got for you today is phishing. And we have another poll question about phishing. How confident are you in your ability to identify a phishing email or a malicious link? Really anything malicious. It could be a text. Rate yourself 1 to 5. 1 is not confident at all. 5 is very confident. This one, so I give this presentation literally hundreds of times. During the month of October, it might be 8 or 9 times a day. And so we speak to thousands of people. This question is remarkably consistent, regardless of who I'm talking to. So I'll be shocked if it's not consistent with this audience today.
Interesting.
Let's see. A lot of confidence coming in so far. Please take the poll.
I know it's like a quick story from me is that when we got the simulated phishing emails, and the first time that I got caught and I clicked on it and I was like, oh, that changed my behavior completely. I was like, oh my gosh, I have to be really careful. I can't believe I was tricked like that, and didn't want to be tricked again.
Oh, I've even clicked on them. Not lately, but I have. That's the point of those programs. And I think those programs really work. I think simulated phishing programs, if they're done well, work really well. I don't like it when those programs get too punitive. But I think if you think about it purely as education, I think it's a really good idea. Okay, so a ton of confidence on here. Yeah, I'm not surprised. So if we look at how the general public feels, the 4s and 5s that you rated yourselves, that's the blue on the chart on the left. And you can see how much confidence there is out there. So we broke this one down by country because it's really interesting by country, because you can see that it's almost universal except for Germany. I can tell you, after living in Germany for 13 years, I lived there in my 30s for a large chunk of my adult life. I'm not surprised that they're a little more self-effacing, not quite as boastful. They tend to be a little more understated. I actually did an interview with a German press outlet not too long ago, and they had read this study because this includes the German public, and the reporter had some questions, and they said, why do you think the Germans aren't as confident? And I said, well, actually, I think the German confidence level here is probably pretty accurate. And everybody else feels overconfident. We all tend to think it's going to be somebody else that's going to click. Even cybersecurity professionals, right? Like, we're all vulnerable to these things. If you catch somebody at the right moment of the day with the right type of malicious message, like, there's a chance that we're all vulnerable to these things. So that's what we caution people, is not to feel too confident, not to think it's always going to be somebody else who's going to click. Because if we all think it's going to be somebody else, then this math doesn't pencil, right? Like, this does not compute, because the vast majority of things, bad things that happen, still start with a phishing email, whether it's a ransomware attack or what have you. I've been using this example of a phish for a number of years. It's old, but it's still a tactic that the bad guys use, and it was so well done that I still share this as an example of how tricky these things can be. So I worked at a company that people probably know now because they had a massive ransomware outage last spring that caused 15,000 car dealers to do business with pen and paper for a couple weeks. CDK. So this came into from one of our customers to one of our salespeople. So the CFO at a car dealership, this came from his legitimate sender address, so not a spoofed address. And if you're a salesperson and you get a DocuSign, that's a good thing. This is a great day. I've sold my deal. With, I've got a signed contract. This is the whole point of my job. Yeah, exactly. Rah, rah. So he clicked on it, and I didn't really blame him for that. Luckily, our technology blocked him from going to a credential harvesting site. But I called him and I just said, hey, are you in the sales cycle with this customer? Were you expecting a DocuSign? And he said, yeah, we're negotiating, but I was expecting a PDF attachment of a signed contract. I was not expecting a DocuSign. I just figured he changed his mind. And so that was the key right there, was that this wasn't exactly what he was expecting. So it turned out, we called the dealership. We said, we think you have a problem. They had a network compromise. And so this is what trips people up, I think, still a lot, is when you're getting a phish and it's from a legitimate sender address and you're dealing with a partner. I mean, we all know that third-party risk is a huge problem. You're dealing with some third party and they've had a security issue, and you're seeing the brunt of it on your side. Your employees are being attacked because of what happened to this third party. You see this all the time with like accounts payable, BEC type emails. These can be really, really hard for employees to detect. So we tell people, just like I told that salesperson, if you don't even know what's wrong with it, it just doesn't feel right, your spidey sensors are going off because it wasn't exactly what you expected, pick up the phone and call the sender. And this number, 87% of people will do this. This number has been climbing up year after year in this survey, that more and more of us are on guard for these things, and we'll actually take the time to call the sender and make sure that what we got was legitimate. 2/3 of people very often are always checked for phishing, which is good. I think that's because of the simulated phishing programs like you mentioned, but just having those spidey senses. And so I know a lot of people will train people to recognize exactly what is a fishy element, like what's in the email that you should recognize. But really now with AI, with like so many, like the random scammy texts we get, there's nothing actually malicious in the text. So it's really just about using your spidey senses. And if it doesn't feel right, we tell people it's better to report it or to pick up the phone and call, or sometimes both. So these are just examples of some of the 1 or 2 click phish report buttons that are out there. And if you don't have these, or you don't have them available for your customers, you should really think about it. We're big fans of these. And here's why. When something is harder to do, it takes more motivation to do it, right? I gotta educate myself, and I've got to get motivated to do the activity because it's going to be difficult. So I really got to work myself up. If something's easy to do, it doesn't take as much motivation. So that's why we like these so much. As opposed to telling people to, save the email and then attach it to another email and send it to the security team. Yeah. Like those are not good methods. We're big fans of the phish report buttons, because this is some smart behavioral science right here. Okay, next topic on that list. Passwords. This is my absolute favorite section. The data here fascinates me. Human behavior on this one really, really fascinates me. So our first poll question for you: how long are the passwords that you usually create? Now I have high expectations for this audience that your answers are going to be far, far better than the general public, but we'll see. 6 characters or less, 7 to 8 characters, 9 to 11, 12 to 15, or 16 characters or longer. And we'll see what you guys say here. We got 2 or 3 more questions about passwords, but I think people's password habits just, I think one of the things that I'll say while you guys are taking the poll is that one of the things we have to remember as security or IT professionals is that if we don't give people the tools to have good habits, they're going to figure out something else. and we might not like that something else that they're doing. To make it easier for themselves. So we'll talk about that in a minute, and you'll see why from some of the data that we've got. Okay, so a whole lot of people saying 12 to 15 characters. That's pretty good. If it's 15, I can sleep at night. When it gets shorter than that, then I start to lose sleep. Still a lot of you using very short passwords. So NIST and therefore the National Cybersecurity Alliance, we've all recently changed our advice. It's 15 or 16 characters or longer these days. So very long. Actually, what the NIST research shows is that length is more important than complexity. So I know we often tell people it's got to be long and complex, but the reality is with the password cracking tools, length trumps complexity. So length is actually far more important. So it's okay to tell people to use passphrases and things like that, even if they're not complex, because length is more important. So let's see how you guys compared to the public. You scored a lot better than they did, but I would say there's still a little bit of room for improvement. Terrifyingly enough, there's still 29% of people using passwords that are only 7 to 8 characters. But the vast majority, or the most popular answer here was 9 to 11 characters, still way too short. So I think everybody's got room for improvement on this one for sure. 15 or 16 characters is a really long password. So maybe think about a passphrase or something like that. Next poll question. How often do you use unique passwords for your important online accounts? So when I give this to the general public, I usually go into great detail about the definition of uniqueness, but I hope this audience understands uniqueness that doesn't look anything like a password that you use anyplace else. So you would be surprised. I talk to people who have a system they've devised and they think it's unique. So they have kind of a core password that they use everywhere, and then they add a few things on depending on the account that they're signing into, and then they think, oh, that's unique to that particular account. Well, anything that has a pattern like that is not really unique. Just ask a cyber criminal. And then we also talk a lot about what's considered an important online account. So many people go through life thinking, I don't have anything of value to a bad guy. Why would I need to protect my email? Why do I need to protect my social media account? What is a bad guy going to do with that? Your email is often tied to your password reset processes for other accounts. So when we remind people of that, the light bulb goes off in their heads. And then we've all gotten the Facebook direct message from Aunt Betty, but it really wasn't Aunt Betty. Aunt Betty just lost control of her Facebook account and you're getting DM'd by a cyber criminal. So we do a lot to remind people that even things that they don't think have value in the criminal underworld definitely have value to a bad guy. So let's see how you guys are doing on this one. Majority of the time is by far the most popular answer. So that's really good. And there's quite a few of you that said all the time. Don't freak out. Here's what the public says.
Oh gosh, they're like, I have the one password I created.
Yep. So when I look at this data compared to some of our other questions in the whole report, all the other data, I feel like even the 34% that said all the time are being a little generous with themselves, because we look at the rates of compromise that they report and other things, and you're like, really? Do you really use a completely unique password on every single account all the time? So yeah, 34% said all the time, 31% the majority of the time, 18% half the time, 13% some of the times. 4% of people admitted to still using the same password on everything. I'll tell you a little story about myself. Before I was in cybersecurity, I kind of had one of those habits of using a couple different passwords over and over again. And I remember listening to the news or something out on a walk, and I was hearing about the Yahoo data breach. And I just thought, and this was a big one. This was probably a decade or so ago now, before I worked in cybersecurity. Still one of the biggest breaches ever of usernames and passwords. And I thought to myself, if you're like me and you have a little bit of gray hair and you had a Yahoo account back in the day, you were thinking, who cares? I haven't logged on to that in a million years. I mean, we all had one in the late 90s when we were all going online. You had the sound of your modem and your AOL, and everybody had a Yahoo account. Like, it was ubiquitous. And so I just thought when that happened, the bad guys can have at it. I haven't logged on to that account in forever, and I don't think I have anything in there of value to anybody. So yeah, they can knock themselves out. because I didn't understand that they're going to take the passwords, the credentials stolen in one breach, and try to use those to get into other accounts. And then it was explained to me how they have software that can run through different iterations of a password, because they know people tend to use the same thing and just iterate on it. Maybe swap out numbers and letters and things like that. So I still explain this to people this way to this day, because I don't think most people understand that it's not just about the password to that account. It's about what else that password can get you into for the bad guys.
Absolutely. It's hard for people to connect the dots. And it's amazing how many times, that's not important, and that not knowing a dot or where that comes in, that stuff. I'm glad you told that story, because I think that,
people are acting as their own risk managers. They're trying to figure out in their own heads, like, how they think cybercrime works and what they think will protect them. And so there's some security myths out there. I think we probably need to do a whole nother presentation just about myths.
Yeah.
But people tell themselves
Great
these
idea.
things. Oh, if I do this little thing, this will help me. If I change this or I do that, like, that's going to help me. So this is my favorite question, I think, in the whole survey. So what we ask people is, how often do you use the same one? How long are they? And, we tell them they have to be long and complex, and you can't use the same one twice. Well, most websites are going to tell them it has to be complex. We tell them it's got to be long, but most websites are going to have rules telling you need complexity too. So then they say, well, how am I supposed to keep track of all these things? And so that's what this question is getting at. How do you keep track of all your passwords? Do you write them down in a notebook? Please answer in the chat. Do you keep them on a document in your computer? Maybe it's a password protected spreadsheet or something like that. You store them in your phone. Do you email them to yourself? I was probably guilty of that 20 years ago. Do you just remember them? Then I wonder how many accounts you have and whether or not they're really unique. Do you save them in the browser? Do you use an actual password manager application? Or my daughter told me she does this. I just reset them every time I need to log in. That sounds really inconvenient to me, but it's kind of a weird form of MFA if you think about it, because she had to authenticate some other way to be able to change her password.
I don't have patience for that. It's already, there's already enough. Where's I'm surprised you don't have one I have a sticky note that I attach to the underside of my keyboard or my monitor. I'm amazed at how many times we see that.
I think people who use sticky notes probably choose the I write them down in a notebook answer. That's probably the closest thing to just the whole idea of writing them down somewhere. Yeah.
Oh gosh,
okay, so we have a lot.
I saw Lisa, I saw this. I should have taken a picture to show you, but I saw in a store, a little gift store the other day, a little notebook that said, "Not my passwords." And it was like a little book for someone's passwords. I was like, I can't believe they're selling this still. This is terrible.
Oh yeah, you can go to an office supply, or you can jump on Amazon and look for password notebooks, and they sell them. Yeah. All right, so we've got a whole bunch of password manager users here. That's fantastic. My second favorite answer after that is the password manager in the browser. If you'd asked me about that 5 years ago, I probably would have said, no, that's not one of my favorite answers. But what Chrome in particular is doing is looking a whole lot more like an actual password manager, and they're doing a whole bunch of authentication behind the scenes. I think Google's racing towards zero trust for a browser, which is a hard thing to do. So I think that I'm more comfortable with those than most of us would have been a couple of years ago. Not too many people doing anything else. Let's see, what was that one? Oh, just remember them. Yeah, I wonder how many accounts you really have if you say you're just remember them. Let's see how the public scored. We'll look at the comparison here. Yeah, so they love their password. Yeah, they love their password notebook. So for all 4 years that we've been doing this study, the password notebook is the most popular answer. Now you could, even the Pentagon told me this was their favorite answer. But if you can't lock it up in a desk drawer at the Pentagon, where can you keep a password notebook? So I was actually okay with that when I thought about it a little bit more. people who lock this up in a desk drawer at home or something, they trust that more than they trust a password manager, because they don't understand enough about the security that's going on at the password manager companies, like the technology that's behind all that. They will believe things like, oh, the employees of the password manager company can see my passwords. Nope, they can't. It's zero knowledge architecture, like, you know. Um, so there's still the loss of theft here that that bothers us the most. My least favorite answer, though, is actually keeping them on a document in your computer, because there are people who will do the password protected spreadsheet, for example, not understanding that if they get a malware infection, the only thing between the bad guy and that spreadsheet is that one password protecting that spreadsheet. I had somebody ask me in a session lately, well, what if my spreadsheet is actually online, as opposed to being stored on my computer? And I was like, no, that's probably even worse.
That's not the
um,
point. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And there will even be people who, when I give this presentation, will say, well, I figured out how to encrypt things, so I encrypted it, you know, and then you wonder, like, wow, you're going to a lot of trouble, as I said, to try and be your own risk manager, to try and be your own cybersecurity professional, to figure these things out, rather than trusting the professionals at the password manager applications. So storing them in my email, storing them in your phone, writing them on a document in your computer, those are all our least favorite answers. I guess if you work at the Pentagon, I'm okay with you locking up a password notebook, but that's not exactly one of our favorite answers either. So like many of you in the audience, we are huge fans of password managers. We just think this keeps life a whole lot simpler. Yeah, I mean, all the good things things to remind your users are that, you know, that zero knowledge architecture, the employees can't see your passwords, nobody can. Encryption, using MFA, of course, with all of these, having a long, complex password and MFA on the password manager itself, but with benefits like dark web monitoring to tell them if they're using a password that's already compromised. Some of them will tell you if you're using the same password on too many accounts, you're using something that's too short or too hackable. There's just a ton of benefits here. And then one of the other things we emphasize a lot with end users is how many times many of us have texted a password to a family member or to a partner. We've all done. I mean, think of the use case of, like, you're booking family vacation with your spouse's frequent flyer miles for the whole family. So you say, oh, can I have the password to your frequent flyer account? And oh, by the way, can you text me the MFA code too? So if you're in that situation, being able to share passwords securely through these is really helpful. Same thing with aging parents. If you're helping to manage your aging parents' affairs, this is the safest way to share passwords. So even if they don't think it's a great idea for just themselves, as soon as you start to talk through some of those scenarios, people start to understand that these can make life a whole lot easier, and it's probably more secure than what they're doing instead. If you're a cybersecurity person and you're still afraid of these solutions, then I think what you have to think about is, like I said earlier, they're probably keeping a password notebook instead. So your choice isn't between, do we give people the tools to make it easier? Do we give people a password manager for company use, or don't we? The choice is, if we don't give them a password manager, what are they doing instead? Because I might not like some of those other options as much as a password manager. So we encourage people to think of it that way, especially IT professionals who might be a little afraid. They're afraid they're going to pick the one that's going to get hacked. That's what they're afraid of, and I understand that. Okay, multi-factor authentication. I'm just going to share some data with you about that. This number has been ticking up. 81% of participants have heard of it. I think last year it was only 72%. The people that struggle the most with this are silent generation and baby boomers. So it's the folks in their, I think that's like 60s, 70s, 80s, and just the senior set, right? A lot of them don't know how to use it. If you're like me, you've been on like a Zoom call and a FaceTime at the same time with your aging loved one, trying to show them how to turn on MFA on Facebook or something. It's complicated. We don't even call it the same thing everywhere. For Amazon, it's an OTP, a one-time password. There's text, there's push notifications from authenticator apps, there's YubiKeys. There's so many different ways to do MFA. So I think whenever you add complexity like that, it gets really difficult for the aging population that didn't grow up with this technology. So if you want to do a good deed, find an aging loved one in your family or in your community, and help them turn on MFA. People use this on their financial services accounts, as you can see. By and large, that's most popular. But things like social media, healthcare accounts, all those doctor portals that we all have, your email accounts, like these are the places where people need help to configure this, because it's something that that generation really struggles with. And because the instructions might not be too clear to them, it's really helpful to have one of their loved ones actually sit down with them. And we've got some how-to videos, those can be helpful. But actually sitting with grandma and helping her do this is probably the best way to make sure it gets done. Okay, this is what our data tells us about our next to last behavior on the list, or the last two actually, updates backing up and AI. AI not necessarily being a behavior. Updates, 43% of people presume that their devices are automatically secure somehow, like these things are just safe out of the box.
Yeah.
We're not quite that far into secure by design yet. So a lot of people click remind me later. I've even done that. One of the things I've noticed is that a lot of apps don't need a restart. It doesn't, I mean, I think that's why people got in the habit of clicking remind me later. You're in the middle of doing something and you know it's going to tell you to shut down at the end, or it's going to force a shutdown, and you don't want to have to do that. So then you end up delaying the whole update. That's not always the case anymore. Unfortunately, for the 62% that have turned on automatic updates, even when it's not forcing a reset, I've noticed some updates lately that haven't run on my devices until I've actually powered down. So the other piece of advice we give people is maybe shut your stuff down once a week. Like, that's not a bad idea. It might be good for your mental health to turn your phone off. It was a great excuse for you to tell your teenagers, like, turn your phone off because it might need to run updates. Like, it's IoT devices, right? Our home routers and the firmware. Like, people don't think about all these things we've brought into our homes, and they don't think that they need any maintenance, and they absolutely do.
Well, it's overwhelming too. It's why I like this and this information, but to me, it's really kind of that reminder of, giving people a path and starting somewhere. I think a lot of times people don't know where to start or what to do. It's overwhelming. You throw all this data and stuff, but just say, all right, let's focus on just one thing. Let's look at a password manager. Let's look at your password.
I'd like to see technology companies get better at pushing updates automatically. I mean, if you think about it, I came from automotive. The automakers push updates over the air to cars all the time. We don't necessarily do that with the refrigerator, like in all the other IoT stuff we have in our lives. So I think it's just a maturity thing. Exactly. Okay, backing up our data. So this is something that we're probably doing for people at work. Their employers are doing this, just like updates, the employer's doing it. So these are two things where I don't think people are as good at these things in their personal lives. Only half of people very often are always back up their data. So we recommend the cloud backup services that are, simple subscriptions, really affordable, automated, not a lot to think about, not a lot to have to do, but we're big fans of those. And then on AI, as I said, we added a few questions on AI to the survey this year. And this was the jaw dropper. 38% of people have admitted to sharing sensitive work information with an AI tool without their employer's knowledge. So if you have customers or you're at a company where you haven't figured out which policy is yet and what you're going to block and what you're going to allow, I think there's still some ambiguity out there. The other thing we learned in the report, you can download and read the whole thing if you're interested. I think this number was 51% of employees, people that are of working age, said that they haven't been given any training by their employer on the safe use of AI, and haven't been trained on their company's policy. Their company might not even have a policy. So I think too many people are still thinking about this. It's the excitement of like what I'm going to get out of the thing, right? But this isn't Google. This isn't just about the result or the task that the AI tool is going to do for me. It's people aren't thinking about what they're giving away to the internet. They're thinking more about just like what they're getting. So this is one of the things that we're also trying to raise awareness on. Okay, back to those feelings that we started with at the beginning. We have a few more questions about your feelings. I find cybersecurity intimidating. Does this stuff intimidate you? And if you're at an MSP, I would expect your answers to be really different than the general public, but we'll see. Does this stuff intimidate you?
Well, and Lisa, too, I think you mentioned it with terminology, MFA, OTP, one-time password, sometimes just the nomenclature, can be
Oh, yeah.
the common language and how we talk about it.
Absolutely. I wish that the marketers would have named MFA. Like the name alone, multi-factor authentication, like that's just a
Yeah.
toughie. Couldn't we have named it like, super easy security thing? Like what, just something that resonated a little bit more with consumers somehow. Yeah. Let's see. Is anybody voting on this one? Go ahead and take a poll.
I think they're intimidated by the poll. I think that's just goes to
Yeah,
show.
maybe. There we go. Okay. So people can feel intimidated for a lot of different reasons. So it's nice to see that there's a little bit of disagreement on this one, that not 100% of people feel the same way. Let's see how that compares to the public here. There's a fair amount of intimidation out there. It's almost evenly split if you add up the disagrees and the agrees, but a bit more people agree, and then you've got 29% that are neutral, like they're not even sure. So quite a bit of ambivalence, but quite a bit of intimidation if you add up the agree and the strongly agree. When it comes to intimidation, I blame this guy. We see him all over the place. The hacker in the hoodie. Can we go to the next slide? Yeah, this is a huge problem. We have overused images like this way too much in this industry. And I think at some point we thought, well, if people just know what's going on in cyberspace and how terrible it all is, like we can scare them into submission. Like if they're scared enough, they'll change their behavior. And unfortunately, that we haven't seen that works. This guy shows up on the nightly news when there's a data breach. He or she doesn't even have a face. That's super intimidating. Sometimes there's binary floating around the screen. Like if I do a news interview about a data breach, I know at some point they're going to cut away from the picture of me, and you're going to see the fingers on the keyboard in the dark, or the close-up of a motherboard, or the binary floating around. And all this stuff is really, really intimidating. And I would argue these aren't good motivators for the general public. So 44% of people tell us they feel scared about their online safety due to media coverage, and 47% said the media makes it seem really complicated. So I don't think that's helping the cause very much, and doesn't get their engagement, right? That's my not only does it not motivate me, but it doesn't interest me enough to want to engage on the topic and maybe change my behavior. All right. Next question. I find staying secure online frustrating. So people can feel frustrated for a couple of different reasons here. You can just be your average consumer watching the 6 o'clock news, and it just seems like there's something bad in the headlines every day in the world of cybersecurity. You can be a security professional, and you're really tired of this game of whack-a-mole and having to be right 100% of the time, and the bad guys only have to be right once. So there's a couple different reasons out there to be frustrated. When I talk to people that work in financial services or the defense sector, man, that frustration level is really, really high because there are so many security controls around them at work. It can make it really hard for them to get things done. Go to some websites that seem completely innocuous and might be innocuous, but the security tool got it wrong and labeled it malicious, and now they can't do something really simple that they want to do. So there's lots of different reasons for this. So it looks like there's a fair amount of frustration in the audience here, pretty evenly split between disagree, neutral, and agree. Let's look at what the public said here. They're also pretty evenly split. More frustration than not. 28% of people total disagree with this, and 27% feel neutral. And you can see the most popular answers to agree with the statement that there's a lot of frustration out there. People feeling like this. And I think this is, when I think about my friends at financial services organizations that have pretty draconian security measures in place, like I sense a lot of the frustration. They can't use Zoom, they can't use this, they can't use that. Like
Yeah.
it's frustrating. There's also a lot of worry out there. So 58% of people say that falling victim to cybercrime is something that worries them, and 50% say that they're likely to be the target of cybercrime. So I think why we're seeing that number so high, that people feel individually targeted, is things like pig butchering. It's these malicious. Well, the text itself doesn't look malicious, but I got one a couple weeks ago. I left my shoes in your car, right? These random texts that we're getting that are coming from these crime centers in organized crime centers, primarily in Asia. Their latest count was there's 200,000 people that have been human trafficked into these centers that are being forced to scam, primarily Americans. And so I think that, my neighbor got one. Usually they're innocuous. It looks like a wrong number, and so they're hoping that I'm gonna think of this person, barefoot somewhere, and I'm gonna answer and say like, "Oh, I'm sorry, wrong number," and then they're gonna strike up a conversation with us that's gonna turn into a friendship scam, a romance scam, a crypto scam. Take your pick. My neighbor got one lately that included so much personal information about her, very, very targeted, that she had this visceral feeling that there was some bad guy sitting in a car out in front of her house. And I had to talk her down off the ledge. Like no, all that information is available either in your social media because you put it there, or on the dark web. So these are all things that somebody could find if they wanted to, and just don't respond. It's really hard to get people not to engage. But I think that's increasing this feeling that we're being targeted with these things, and actually we are. Okay, my last question for everybody today. Before you worked in security and you took training on these types of things, or as maybe you took classes in school, whatever you did, have you changed your behavior as a result of the training? So this would mean that just based on knowledge or capability alone, you found your own intrinsic motivation, and you had the opportunity, so you had all the elements for behavior change. Did you do any of these things? Did you start using MFA? Did you get better at recognizing malicious emails or texts, any of those things, all social engineering? Did you start using a password manager, either one that's in a browser or a standalone application? Did you start installing updates, using strong separate passwords, backing up your data? Or be honest if you didn't change anything at all. Or maybe from this crowd, you'll answer the last answer, I already do all these things, so I didn't need to change anything. And you should be able to check all that apply here. Or put that in the chat. I'll see what you guys say. This one is remarkably consistent with almost every organization that we speak to. The top 2 or 3 answers are pretty much the same everywhere, which is good because they're the top 2 or 3 things that I would pick if you force me to prioritize. All right, the graph is still moving around a little bit. I'm going to wait a second. It looks like by far we have reporting phishing messages as the most popular. And then after that, it's MFA. But for third place, it's neck and neck. So we'll see if anybody else wants to take the poll. A lot of people using password managers and using strong, unique passwords. Those kind of go together, don't they? How in the world do you use strong, unique passwords without a password manager?
That's my favorite part, is that they tell me the complex password I should use.
Yeah. I tell people that it can generate a new password faster than I can figure one out. And to sign on to like my bank, with facial recognition and push notifications and all those things, like you can authenticate on most accounts faster with a password manager than without, because it's going to type that password in there a whole lot faster than I ever could. Okay, it looks like we practically have a tie there for second place now. Let's see how that compares to the public. So some of your most popular answers were also their most popular answers. The most popular one always is better at recognizing phishing. I credit the simulated phishing programs for that. We've spent a lot of time training people on phishing, and I think it's working. So that's good. And then in second place, the public said MFA. That's also one of the most popular answers whenever I speak to people. And then generally using strong, unique passwords, but I'm glad so many of you guys did so much. let's see, for you guys, how many people didn't do anything at all? Was it nobody?
Doesn't look like anyone answered that.
That's good. That's good. That's really good. When it came to the public, only 4% of them took no action at all. So we think this is really phenomenal because, as I said, when those folks got training, they got knowledge or capability, but the motivation had to come from within. And so, so that intrinsic motivation was enough to cause them to do something. I think a lot of us in security think, well, we'll just, here's our laundry list of things. If we just we should be able to tell people these things and they should just go do them. And humans don't work that way. Like, we need a little help with the motivation. So the fact that the training maybe was engaging enough, or people had their own intrinsic motivation to take action, like, we think that's fantastic. When I think when you're assigning training to folks, you want them to feel, like this. You want them to feel like they can handle anything. You want to build up their confidence. Training is knowledge, and knowledge is empowering. And so rather than scaring them, you really want to focus on empowering them. And there's not a lot of training out there that does this today. There's some, but I think the messaging that we have for end users, the way we talk about these things, learning to use layman's terms and speak to them with empathy and empower them so that they feel more motivated. And then I think those are all best practices. And then I think when it comes to, what the actual motivator is, if you talk to anybody in sales and marketing, they will tell you that when you're selling an intangible, something that you can't feel or taste, that's not sitting there in front of you, it's really hard to convince somebody of something, like to sell them something that they can't see. So if you think about it, that hacker in a hoodie is remote. He's probably on the other side of the country or globe somewhere, and it's intangible. It's a threat that they can't see, that's not right there in front of them. And so you're trying to use that as a motivator, and then you wrap it up in fear, and that just makes people feel lousy. So rather than talking about the bad thing that might happen if you don't do some of these things, we try to lean into talking about how much better you're going to feel if you do some of these things. So the peace of mind that you'll have from using MFA on all your accounts, for example. So that's my advice for you today, is to spread some peace of mind. It's in short supply in our modern society. And rather than having people worry about these things, we think it's a better motivator for them to actually take some action, and then they're going to feel a whole lot better about it. So that's it for me today. I'm happy to see if we have any questions, but you're welcome to visit us at staysafeonline.org. If you're looking for plain spoken advice for folks on any type of issue with technology you can possibly think of that's security or privacy related, we've got content on our website that's all in very plain spoken terms. The tone of voice is like you're talking to your next door neighbor. And then on YouTube and our social media channels, we have a whole bunch of content as well. We have 2 series that are of note that I'll mention that I think are going to be in the chat. So one of them is Cubicle series, or the Cubicle video series. It's on cubicleseries.com and on YouTube. This is like watching an episode of The Office, but it's the office of the bad guys. So if you're looking for a way to get somebody's attention, you want to use a little bit of humor and give people a little bit of insight. That was a light bulb moment for me. That's what this is based on. The fact that you're not up against some kid, you're up against a machine, you're up against organized crime and nation states. So it's a look at their mundane workaday life in the office. And we've had 9 million views of those videos. They're very popular. And we also have a series called Mom, Don't Click That on our YouTube. It's to help you with your aging loved ones.
I love that. Thank you so much. Oh, yeah. Thank you so much, Lisa.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah. Go ahead, Bessie.
No, I was just going to say thank you so much, Lisa, for joining us and for all of your insights. Is there any one last message or advice you would have for our audience before we say goodbye?
It's easy to stay safe online if you do some of these things. Let's talk about it like it's easy, not like it's hard. And that's more about motivating to people. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Lisa, for joining us. This was so fun. Next up, we're going to hear from Keith Marciano with Sales Pitch.
Play ball. Happy holidays. In my ugly sweater, your lack of cheer is disturbing. It's a special hot stove sales pitch. Throughout the year, I get asked many different questions around sales. So today we're going to touch all the bases on the top 4 sales problems IT service providers have asked me to help them with. Number 1, how do I get leads? Well, you can't buy them. You need to go get them. Prospect. Ask your clients and referral partners, your centers of influence, who they know and if they could vouch for you and introduce you to them. Develop referral partnerships and centers of influence. Keep doing that throughout the year. Go to networking associations where your target industry goes. If you don't have a target industry, go join a CEO or executive group. Go where those business leaders attend. If you're comfortable, do some public speaking events. Number 2, should I invest in a marketing company? This is really a growth stage conversation. It depends on where you are. If you're under $1.5 million in annual revenue, I'd refer you back to number 1 and ask you to go get your own leads. You're going to get a better ROI on that. Put together webinars that your ideal prospect or client will attend. Make sure those events and webinars that you do are focused on topics around their business and the problems that you solve, not about your tools or services or solutions. Once you hit around that 1.5 million mark, you can outsource your marketing. You're probably going to spend somewhere between $4,000 to $5,000 per month to do this correctly. You're going to have a professional website, somebody that can write 2 to 3 blogs or articles every month around your technology and your target industries. Somebody that's going to manage your social media, predominantly LinkedIn. Marketing is not sales generation. It's building familiarity and curiosity to back up your sales and prospecting efforts. 3, what are we doing wrong? We're generating sales proposals, but not closing many opportunities. Most likely, you're not qualifying the prospect correctly, and/or they're not a qualified prospect in the first place. You're racing to the proposal. What KPI do you want? Number of proposals delivered or new revenue dollars? Ask good questions. Put yourself in the shoes of the buyer. Discover business problems and how those problems impact their company. Then articulate your value and tell stories on how you've helped others that have had similar problems to them. Number 4, when should I hire a salesperson? The better question is, how should I build my sales team and how should I hire, manage, and train salespeople? Start with this. Start with like a sales administrator, somebody for order taking, procurement, proposal generation. Hire an account manager to be an advocate for your clients. That should be in place before hiring a salesperson. Also, you should have a documented sales process and onboarding plan in place before hiring a dedicated salesperson. Help them be more successful. Provide that hire with a roadmap to success. Try to do owner-led sales as long as you can. Typically somewhere between the 2 to 4 million in annual revenue range is best before hiring a sales hunter. At Pax8 Academy, we can help you with all these sales questions and more. We have free on-demand content, instructor-led courses, peer groups, and one-on-one sales coaching that will help you go deeper with each of those challenges I just discussed. Reach out to me on LinkedIn or contact your Pax8 account manager to ask how we can help you grow your business. Happy New Year.
Thanks, Keith, for a great sales pitch. I loved your sweater, thought it was so fun, and of course, great content to close us out for the year. We also want to thank Lisa Plaggemier for joining us and sharing so many really interesting insights on how the public views cybersecurity and how our viewers also view cybersecurity, and there's just lots to unpack there. So thank you everyone so much for watching. We're going to take a little bit of time off in the new year, but we will be back in February. So make sure to stay alert and be ready to tune in in February. So happy holidays, everyone. Chris, take it away.
Well, trying to uphold this for Rex and represent well, but especially after this show and the conversation here, a lot of opportunities to think about asking yourself, what are you going to do differently to improve your business? Thanks for being here. Take care. Bye.